The woman swung her purse like she was trying to take someone's head off. It connected with the side of a dog's face, a German shepherd sitting calmly beside his owner at a picnic table near the waterfront. The dog didn't yelp. He didn't snap. He turned his head slowly and looked up at her with amber eyes that held no fear whatsoever. The owner looked up too. His name was Liam, 38 years old. Navy SEAL, third deployment behind him, currently on medical leave after a training injury to his left shoulder. He'd come to Victoria, British Columbia for 2 weeks, quiet city, Harbour views, a place where nobody needed anything from him. The dog's name was Kodak, 8 years old, retired military working dog, Belgian, Malinois Cross German Shepherd, trained for detection and tactical support. He'd been with Liam for 6 of those 8 years. They'd cleared buildings together in places Liam would never say out loud. Kodak had a scar on his left flank from a piece of shrapnel that had missed Liam by 4 inches. Neither of them startled easily. The woman was still talking. She hadn't stopped since the moment she'd rounded the corner of the seawall path. Her name was Vivienne, early 50s, cream-colored blazer, gold earrings, the kind of sunglasses that cost more than a month of Liam's groceries. She had a small dog of her own, a white Pomeranian in a monogrammed carrier slung over her shoulder, and she'd decided apparently that Kodak had come too close to it. "You need to control your animal," she said. Her voice had the particular sharpness of someone who had never once been told no and meant path. He was right. He could have startled Coco. Liam looked at Coco. Coco appeared to be asleep. He looked back at Vivienne. He was sitting still. "I don't care what you think he was doing. You shouldn't have a dog that size off-leash in a public area." Liam glanced down. Kodak's leash was clipped to the table leg. It was visible from 3 meters away. He said nothing. That silence seemed to offend Vivienne more than anything he could have said. She pulled her sunglasses down the bridge of her nose and looked at him the way certain people look at things they find beneath them, not with anger exactly, but with a kind of studied contempt, like she was categorizing him and filing him under a label she'd already decided on. "People like you," she said, "shouldn't be allowed at places like this." She walked away. Liam watched her go. He reached down and put his hand on Kodak's back. Kodak leaned into it slightly. That was all. There's a particular kind of person who mistakes power for character. They've been told so often that they matter, by their address, their accountant, their social circle, that they've stopped questioning whether the people telling them are right. Vivienne was that kind of person. She had spent 53 years building a life that looked, from the outside, like it couldn't be argued with. What she didn't know about Liam could fill a classified briefing document. What she didn't know about Kodak could save a life. She was about to find out both things. Beacon Hill Park that afternoon was busy the way Victoria gets busy in mid-July. Families on the grass, cyclists on the path, kids feeding the ducks near the pond with pieces of bread their parents were pretending not to notice. A food truck near the south entrance was doing a solid business in fish tacos. Someone had set up a small pop-up market along the inner path, local artists and crafters with their tables and canopies. Liam walked through it slowly. Kodak moved at his left heel, steady, ears tracking sounds, but relaxed. They'd done this together enough times that their pace had become synchronized without either of them thinking about it. Liam's shoulder ached in the way it had been aching for 3 months. He'd learned to move around it. He bought a coffee from a cart near the rose garden. He sat on a bench and looked at the flowers and drank it. He wasn't thinking about Vivienne. She was already gone from his mind, filed into a category he had a lot of practice filling. People who would never understand what they didn't understand, and who would never know what they were talking to. He'd learned a long time ago not to explain himself. Kodak put his chin on Liam's knee. Liam scratched behind his ear. 20 minutes later, the screaming started. It came from the far side of the pond, near the walking bridge. A woman's voice, high and sharp, cutting through the ambient noise of the afternoon. Then another voice, a child's. And then the specific sound of a crowd pivoting, that collective intake of breath that means something has happened. Liam was on his feet before the second sound finished. He moved fast, not running exactly. Something more efficient than running, a ground-covering stride that ate distance without looking like effort. Kodak was beside him, no command necessary. They reached the bridge in under a minute. A boy of about 6 had fallen through the railing gap into the pond. The pond was shallow near the edges, but dropped away quickly toward the center, and the child had gone in at a bad angle and come up disoriented. He was thrashing. He couldn't find his footing. The water was pulling at him in the strange, unhelpful way still water does when someone panics. Not a current exactly, but enough. The crowd on the bridge had gone to the railing. A man was taking his shoes off. A woman was screaming into her phone. Liam was already over the railing. He entered the water feet first, hit bottom, felt the silt give under his boots. 4 strides, and he had the boy. He got an arm around him, rotated him, got his head up. The child grabbed at him with both hands. Liam held steady. He talked to him low and even, "I've got you. I've got you. Stop kicking, I've got you." The same voice he used in dark buildings when everything was going sideways, and the only thing that helped was certainty. The boy stopped kicking. Liam walked them both back to the bank. A man reached down and took the child. Liam climbed out after him, soaked to the chest, shoulder screaming, mud on his jacket. The boy was crying now, which meant he was breathing, which was what mattered. Someone handed Liam a towel. He didn't know where it came from. He used it. Then he heard a voice behind him. Oh God, that's my son." He turned. Vivian. She pushed through the small crowd, dropped to her knees on the grass in her cream blazer without a moment's thought about it, and gathered the boy into her arms. The boy, whose name turned out to be Felix, grabbed onto her and cried harder. Vivian held him and shook. Liam could see it from where he stood. She was shaking the way people shake when the thing that almost happened finishes arriving in their body all at once. She looked up. She saw Liam. Something moved across her face. A calculation, or maybe the interruption of a calculation. Her mouth opened, and then Coco from somewhere behind her started barking, thin, frantic little barks. And a park attendant arrived and asked if anyone needed medical attention. And the moment closed over like water. Liam handed the towel back to whoever had given it to him. He checked Kodak, who was dry and unimpressed. He picked up his coffee from where he'd set it on the railing, still there, still warm somehow, and he walked away. He didn't wait to be thanked. He almost never did. Some things need no witness. The act was the act. The boy was breathing. That was the full accounting. Liam didn't think about Vivienne until she appeared at the door of the cafe where he was eating breakfast 2 days later. The cafe was called the Pilot's Cup, and it was 4 blocks from the harbor, and had the best eggs Benedict in the city, according to a laminated sign on the counter that Liam had chosen to believe. He came every morning. He sat at the same corner table, because it had the best sight line, and habits were habits. Kodak lay under the table and made himself small in the polite practiced way he did in indoor spaces. Vivienne came in at 8:20. She looked different from the seawall. Smaller, somehow. Not in a physical sense. She was still put together, dressed carefully, as though the blazer and the posture were armor she'd put on that morning. But something inside it had shifted. She stood in the doorway and scanned the room. When she found Liam, she crossed to his table without hesitating. She stood there for a moment without speaking. Liam looked up from his eggs. "May I?" she said, and gestured at the chair across from him. He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded. She sat down. She set her bag carefully on the floor beside her. She didn't order anything, didn't look at the menu. She folded her hands on the table the way people do when they're trying to hold themselves still. "I looked for you," she said. "After the park. I looked for you, but you'd already gone." Liam said nothing. "Felix told me what you looked like. He said you had a big dog and you were very calm. He said you talked to him and he wasn't scared anymore." She paused. I've been walking around this neighborhood for 2 days. Liam drank his coffee. Vivian's jaw tightened for a moment and then released. I want to apologize, she said, for what I said to you at the waterfront. I was rude. What I said was wrong, and it was unkind, and it was not true, and you did not deserve it. Each sentence came out like it had been rehearsed, but also like the rehearsal wasn't making it easier. And then, you saved my son's life. Liam set his cup down. How is he? She blinked. He's fine. He's fine. He has a small bruise on his arm, but otherwise he's fine. Good. Vivienne waited. She seemed to be expecting something. More, or different, or a kind of absolution she could recognize. Liam reached down and touched Kodak's back. Kodak was watching Vivienne with the polite, steady attention he gave to everything. What you said didn't change what I did, Liam said finally. I wasn't going to let him drown because you were rude to me on a Tuesday. Vivienne stared at him. You apologized, he said. That's between you and your conscience. Take care of your kid. He went back to his eggs. She sat there for another moment. Then she exhaled, a long, unsteady breath, and she picked up her bag and she stood. At the door she stopped and turned back. What's your dog's name? She said. Kodak. Something moved through her expression that wasn't quite a smile. Okay, she said, and she left. This is the part of the story that doesn't make the news, the part that nobody sees. The moment after the moment, when someone is standing in a cafe doorway trying to figure out who they've been and whether it's too late to be something else. Vivienne went home and sat in her kitchen for a long time. Felix was at school. The house was quiet. She looked at her hands. She thought about what she'd said on the seawall. She thought about Liam's face when she'd said it. The absence of reaction. Not because he hadn't heard, but because he'd heard and assessed and filed it and moved on, the way you move on from things that aren't the actual problem. She thought about Felix in the water. She thought about a man who'd gone in after him without breaking stride. A man she'd told, 40 minutes before, that he didn't belong there. Not she was, by any external measure, a successful woman. She'd built a commercial real estate company from a 2-person partnership in her 30s to a 14-person firm, worth more than she'd ever thought she'd have. She'd raised a son on her own, after a marriage that had ended badly and painfully, and in a way she rarely talked about. She was competent and capable, and she had fought for every single thing she had. And she had stood on a seawall and looked at a man she'd never met and decided in 4 seconds that she knew exactly who he was and that he was less than her. She picked up her phone. She called her office. She told them she'd be late. She sat in the kitchen a while longer. Whatever it was she was working out, she was going to have to do it alone. Liam spent the rest of his leave the way he'd planned to. He walked the waterfront. He ate his eggs every morning. He took Kodak out to the park in East Saanich, where there was enough open space that Kodak could run properly, which Kodak needed, and which Liam liked to watch because there was a specific joy to seeing a trained animal choose to move fast when nothing required it of him. His shoulder got incrementally better. By the last 4 days, he could lift his arm above his head without the catch and pull that had been slowing him down since March. He didn't think about Vivienne much. When he did, he felt the thing he usually felt about that category of encounter. Not bitterness. Not even particular regret on her behalf. Just a kind of ambient sadness for anyone who'd organized their interior life around hierarchy. It was a narrow way to live. He'd seen it do worse things to people than a bruised conscience in a cafe. He called his sister on the Thursday. She asked how Victoria was. He said it was good. She asked if he'd done anything interesting. He said not really. She asked about his shoulder and he said it was better. And she said good because she needed help moving a couch in September. And he said he'd be there. And she laughed and they talked about their mother for a while. That was Thursday. On Friday evening, his last full day, he was sitting at the harbor watching the float planes come in when his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. Victoria area code, he answered. Liam. A pause. This is Vivienne. I got your number from the Park Authority's incident report. I hope that's... I'm sorry to call. He waited. I know you don't want anything from me, she said. You made that clear, and you were right to. But I've been thinking about what you said. About the fact that you weren't going to let Felix drown because I'd been rude to you. Another pause. I've been thinking about it because I don't know if I would have done the same thing, if our positions had been reversed. Liam watched a floatplane bank over the harbor and come down perfectly onto the water. Clean, no excess, just the thing done right. You would have, he said. You don't know that. No, but I think most people, when it comes down to it, do the right thing. They just need the moment to arrive, a silence. Then, I want to do something. For you or for Kodak or I don't know. I know you don't want money. I'm not offering money. There's a K9 veterans organization out of Calgary, Liam said. They fund veterinary care for retired military working dogs. The ones whose handlers can't afford the bills on their own. I'll send you the information. A long pause. Okay, Vivienne said quietly. Yes, I'll do that. Good, Liam. Her voice was different now. Smaller. Can I ask you something? He waited. When I said what I said on the seawall, what was it like? Did you think about it afterward? Liam looked at the harbor. The floatplane had reached the dock. A man in a high-vis vest was walking out to meet it. I thought about it for about 30 seconds, he said honestly. Then I stopped thinking about it because there wasn't anything useful to do with it. That's... She stopped. That's a skill. Yeah, he said. It takes a while. She almost laughed. He could hear it in the shape of the silence before she said goodbye. He pocketed his phone. Kodak put his nose against Liam's arm once. Briefly, then looked back out at the water. The floatplane was unloading. People coming off with duffel bags and cameras. Blinking in the early evening light, looking around at the harbor and the city, the way people look when they've just arrived somewhere and haven't decided yet how they feel about it. Liam watched them for a while. Nobody who saw him there could have told you anything about him from looking. A man with a dog, sitting quietly at the water's edge, average build, dark jacket. The kind of stillness that either means nothing or means everything, and most people don't know how to read the difference. His shoulder was almost right. He'd be back on base in 9 days. Kodak would be reviewed for continued handler placement. The vet in Halifax had said his hips were good, his drive was still there, his temperament unchanged. Probably another 2 years, maybe 3. Liam intended to be there for all of it. 2 months after Liam left Victoria, the K9 Veterans Organization in Calgary received a donation. It was large enough that the director called personally to confirm it. She wanted to know who to thank. The name on the file was Vivienne. The note attached said only, "In honor of Kodak and of the man who didn't have to." The director wrote back. She thanked her. She told her the donation would fund care for 11 dogs in the current fiscal year. Vivienne forwarded the email to a contact at her firm who handled their corporate giving portfolio. She attached one line, "I'd like to make this annual." Then she went to pick up Felix from school. He was waiting outside with his backpack, half unzipped the way it always was, his shoes untied the way they always were, talking to a friend about something urgent and 6-year-old, in a way that made him wave at her without looking. She watched him for a moment. She thought about the pond. She thought about the water and the small arms and the 30 seconds between the world having Felix in it and the world. Almost not. She thought about a man who'd been told he didn't belong there, who had gone in anyway. She buckled Felix's seatbelt for him. She tied his shoe. She asked how his day was, and he told her about a frog they'd found near the playground, and she listened carefully because he needed her to. She drove them home. She was not a different person. That's not how it works. Not in an afternoon, not in a phone call. Not even in the worst moment of your life. But she was a person who now knew something she hadn't known before. And she'd decided to do something with that knowledge instead of nothing. That's the small version of how people change. Not lightning, not revelation, just a moment of arriving and choosing to stay there. What Vivienne never learned, what Liam never told her, because it was not a thing he offered casually, was that Kodak's full military designation was MWD K490C, and that his service record included 4 operational deployments, detection work in 2 conflict zones, and a commendation that Liam kept in a folder in the back of a desk drawer and didn't look at very often because he knew what it said, and that was enough. What she didn't know was that when Liam had walked away from the pond that afternoon, the park attendant had taken his name for the incident report, and that the report had noted intervening civilian off-duty military personnel, and that the Harbour Authority had passed it to the base liaison, and that Liam's CO had called him a week later to say that someone had filed a civilian commendation, and asked if he wanted it formally recognized. And asked. Liam had said no thank you. His CO had laughed and said that he would put it in his file anyway, which was the CO's prerogative, and that Liam should enjoy the rest of his leave. What Vivian knew was less than all of that. But it was enough. It turned out to be exactly enough. Liam came back to Victoria the following July. Same cafe, same corner table, same eggs, Benedict, which continued to hold up to their reputation. Kodak was now 9, moving a little slower in the mornings, but still alert, still precise, still watching the room with those amber eyes that had never held fear. The server at the Pilot's Cup recognized him. She said, "Same as last year?" And he said yes. She brought him his coffee and said, "Your dog's beautiful." He looked down at Kodak. "Yeah," he said. That was the whole of it. That was the thing. The narrator would like you to know that some stories end with justice in a courtroom, or a public reckoning, or the kind of clean consequences that feel satisfying to read. This one ended at a cafe table, in the ordinary morning light, with a man who had never needed the world to know his name. He drank his coffee. He ate his eggs. He went home, and Kodak walked beside him all the way there, steady and unhurried, the way he always did. Not because he was commanded to, but because that was simply the nature of the thing between them. Not a transaction. Not a tool and its user. Just 2 souls that had been through enough together to trust the quiet.